So welcome. My name is Chris Finlan, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft, responsible for SSRS, Power BI Report Server, Paginated Reports in the service, a few other things in the service. To my right, I have... Did you turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm a PM on the Power BI Custom Environment team.
Yep. All right. And for those of you who do not know why I have two stuffed animals up here, on my left, the Paginated Report Bear, who many of you have seen before. His whiny foil, that David Eldersfeld called him, Dataflow's dog, making a very rare public appearance for the first time. Dataflow's dog is actually Mr. Matthew, my son's favorite of the two. So he does not usually let him out of the house, but this is a special occasion. Also, for those of you who do not know, November 20th is a big day. It is Paginated Report Bear's first birthday. So what I may ask for at the end of this session is if I can get a video of the room saying, "Happy birthday, Paginated Report Bear," so I could play that. Oh, that's great, thank you. So I can play that as part of a Twitter or a video we put together as kind of an all-up thing. Yes?
Have you sought counseling?
So that was your one question, Turley. So guess what? I'll be looking elsewhere from this point forward. But no, this has been a lot of fun, the Paginated Report Bear stuff. The audience, the community's been great around this. It's been well beyond what my son and I thought it would be when we started this a year ago. So great to have you all here with Paggy and friends. So diving into the session, please silence your cell phones. So what's that? Take it.
Silence my cell phone.
Seriously, I had to remind you of this one. Okay. So Patrick and I have presented before at the Microsoft Business Application Summit. We do not have a challenge filling time. So what we try to do with these things, there's a lot of demos from Patrick. I look for questions and audience interaction as much as possible. I'm far more interested in hearing your feedback and your questions than hearing me repeat the same talking points I've done in multiple sessions. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. I will repeat the question back so people can hear it on the microphone. If for some reason we don't have a mic going around, which I don't believe we do, but that's really the purpose of this. We do have a broad outline. We'll start with, hey, where are we kind of at today, the state of the ecosystem, talking about the functionality in Power BI. I specifically made sure we called out SSRS in the title. I mean, normally what you've seen is a lot of these is Power BI Report Server and blah, blah, blah. This is specifically talking about SSRS 2019 because we just released SQL Server 2019, which SSRS is obviously a big part of, as is Power BI Report Server. So we'll talk about all that, and then there's plenty of time for Q&A. So where are we at today? Is there really anybody in this audience that I need to explain the difference between RDL and PBIX to? Thank God. Okay. So there are now two report types in our ecosystem, RDL, which you're all very familiar with, PBIX. And what do our platforms look like here? On-prem, there are two products, Power BI Report Server and SSRS. So oftentimes I get questions, when should I use one or the other? Power BI Report Server is SSRS with an additional capability, and that is to run Power BI reports and Excel workbooks if you have certain things set up. But under the covers, it is still SSRS. So if you're an enterprise customer with software assurance, or you're a Power BI premium customer that wants to run this in your data center or potentially in the cloud, you would use Power BI Report Server, and you'd still get all of your SSRS capabilities. There really is no reason to run both except in very specific circumstances where you want you're not going to upgrade it for quite some time and you're looking for a longer support cycle, because with Power BI Report Server, that's covered under the modern lifecycle policy, so we have 3 updates a year with brand new features, but it does mean after a year's time, the expectation is if you call support, the answer will probably be upgrade. On the other side, you see the cloud. Now we talk about Power BI and paginated reports in Power BI. And you notice I specifically call out there IaaS. So I call out SQL Server Reporting Services for now. Right now, at least, Power BI Report Server, if you're using it with your SQL license, can't be run on an Azure VM for production. However, my hope is that there will be some news around that we can share in the short term. You can guess what that news might be, but my hope, and what we're finding is that while we want very much for folks to consider and use paginated reports in Power BI, and that be your eventual destination as Microsoft is taking its customers on this journey to the cloud, I work very closely with the SQL team on a daily basis, and we have a lot of conversations, and what they've seen and observed is that for many customers, they are far more willing today to move to the cloud than they were, say, 2-3 years ago even. But for many of them, their first step is moving to IaaS because it's the simplest thing to do in the short term. We're perfectly fine with that. Obviously, I want to get you into Power BI and have this single portal, but moving to IaaS is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and you'll see some of the things we're talking about here today in terms of features as they relate to SSRS or things we're discussing, potentially help you with that scenario, okay? So that is an option to think about if you have, for whatever reason, challenges going to paginated reports in Power BI. IaaS is still something that's there, and for SSRS, there is no licensing challenge there. You can spin up a VM even without a license and rent the license, or you can use your portability benefits. So I did want to make sure that I called that out to folks, because oftentimes people think that the only option is paginated reports in Power BI, which is, I don't want to say great, but that's great that our marketing team is doing a good job of putting that message out there, but there is the option to move to IaaS. So, are paginated reports in SSRS and Power BI the same? No. SQL Server reporting services includes support for the RDL report format and has several server-side capabilities. What are you looking at that strangely for? Oh, I see. This is why I don't present with Patrick very often. You're looking at me like you're... in the context of the Power BI service, there are a lot of similar capabilities and support for RDL reports, but they aren't a directly 100% identical thing. And so really, paginated reports is, I can take this report format that I've used in SSRS and move that to Power BI. Now, in terms of features and things that we're bringing to the cloud service, there are things that line up with what we have in reporting services, but I do think it's important to understand that this is not SSRS in Power BI. It is paginated reports. Okay. The very simple authoring story for RDL, which I'm obviously being facetious because I know that this is challenging. For your on-prem authoring, there's actually two different tools. One is Microsoft Report Builder, which is the report builder you've known and loved. Why the chuckles? I can't believe that these folks... I'm looking at Paul specifically on this. It was SSRS 2016 Report Builder for like 3 years. In the intervening time, we released 2017 and Power BI Report Server, so this was confusing. I'm not saying we did the best job of clearing it up, but we did call that Microsoft Report Builder. There's also the Visix add-in for Visual Studio. There used to be a standalone SSDT. Now they tell you to use the Community Edition with this add-in if you don't have a Visual Studio license for authoring scenarios, and that can also meet your needs, and you're allowed to do that from a licensing perspective, even if you're in a large enterprise. There's no cost to that. For the service, there's something called Power BI Report Builder. Surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, people have been very, maybe excited is too big a word, but they're wanting to use this new Power BI Report Builder with their on-prem products. In fact, I've seen entire blog posts dedicated to how you can use Power BI Report Builder with Power BI Report Server. Don't do this. I mean, you can, but there was a lengthy discussion, debate, internal back and forth between myself and the engineering team on what we should do as it related to the authoring experience with Report Builder and Power BI. And we landed upon having a separate version for the service because it allowed us to iterate more quickly and go and do things that were different than the on-prem product that wouldn't cause engineering support challenges moving forward. Let me give you one example. How many people here use Oracle as a data source? Okay, so a fair number. Did you know that there's a different Oracle provider for the Power BI service than there is for SSRS? There is. This would have been a problem if we had a single version of Report Builder trying to serve both, because we wouldn't have been able to have the proper provider for one or the other. So we were able to do this and support Oracle far faster than we thought because we made a different version of Report Builder. We also went and put specific things in Report Builder in terms of signing into the service and browsing Power BI data sets. And again, the engineering cost up front for that was significantly reduced because of this different version. But I acknowledge that it is confusing to have a product called Power BI Report Server that does not work with Power BI Report Builder. I would say I'm sorry, but I don't have a better answer for that right now. But just understand reasons why we made that decision. That is the authoring story for RDL, or Paginated Reports, as it stands today. Are there questions on this piece? Okay, good. So, what are the differences? So, can I use Microsoft Report Builder with the Power BI service? Can I use SSDT or the add-in with the Power BI service? You can by saving it locally and uploading it, but you don't have the ability to go and publish directly back and forth to the service like you can with Power BI Report Builder. You have a specific Power BI dataset support dialog and workflow in Power BI Report Builder that you don't have in Microsoft Report Builder. We also hide certain data sources and functionality that currently doesn't work in the Power BI service, in the version of Report Builder that's built for the service. So I had somebody contact me and say, hey, the subreports button is disabled. How do I use subreports? I'm like, right now, subreports aren't supported in the service, so that's why we disable the button so you don't get yourself in trouble. They're like, oh, so I use the Microsoft Report Builder to build it with a subreport and then upload it. And I appreciated their enthusiasm for the subreports feature. I truly did. However, you will be blocked when you try to do that because it doesn't work right now. So we were trying to help folks by hiding certain things or removing data sources that wouldn't be supported, because what we were finding was we were running into a lot of errors from users trying to upload things with like ODBC or things like that. So again, there is differences here. It will look 90% the same, but understand why there's a difference and what the differences are. And I will give John White, another MVP, a hat tip for this because I stole this from his slide. I felt that was fair because he asked me for help on his slides. So with that, Patrick will be giving the first demo of the day for Power BI Report Builder.
So the first thing you need to do is get Power BI Report. Right?
Sneeze broken.
Hello? Hello. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right. So to get it, the first thing you need to do is download the Power BI Report Builder. And so if you go, the Paginated Report Builder. So if you go to, sign into Power BI, you can download it there. Or if you just use your favorite search engine, Bing, right? Everybody uses Bing. And search for Power BI Report Builder.
Bing is a perfectly good search engine.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand the...
Just like Edge is a great browser. Okay. So we move on. We move on. Yeah,
You realize this is being recorded, right?
Yeah. I work
That's
for
fine.
Microsoft. That's why I use the new Edge. That's a Chromium browser. Anyway, so you need to download
Wow.
you need to download Power BI Report Builder or Paginated Report Builder. And then once it's downloaded, It's pretty cool. So it's right here, and if you right-click on data sources, this is what I like. The first step in building your report, you got to go and get a data source. If you guys are using Power BI today, you already have all these wonderful data sets that's published to your Power BI service, and so why go out and redo something that you've already done? You can leverage the data sources that's there, the data sets that's there. So if I right-click, you'll see, right, that you have an option to add a Power BI data set connection. And so I complained about the interface in Power BI when you go to connect to these data sets, and Chris Finlan, he listened, and he made the experience a little better here. But obviously the internet is kind of slow. But you can see, right, so here's all my workspaces, and then I just go to the one that I want, and you can see I've certified this one, right? I've endorsed this workspace, so now I can choose this, and then start using this just like I'm connected to a semantic model, tabular model. And so there's a wonderful query designer that's in this that you can use.
It is a perfect, all right, it's a usable.
It's usable. In
certain scenarios, yes.
But to be honest, Marco, we were talking about this, writing DAX for this. So you definitely can use this. It's definitely an option. It's quick. It's easy. And then once you're done, and this is what Chris was talking about, if you don't use the report builder, right, when you go to save, you get an option where I can save, like it's like publishing your Power BI reports. I can save it directly to Power BI without saving the RDL, going to Power BI, choosing Get Data, uploading the file. And so my recommendation is that you should use this. Don't use anything else to design your paginated reports for the service.
Good.
All right,
yes.
cool.
Yeah, and so a couple things to build upon what Patrick just demoed there, so thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
So unlike with Power BI Desktop, it's not a publish experience. It truly is like with the server where you're doing a live save back and forth. So it's kind of a live editing, you hit save, you can see your changes there fairly quickly. So you're not kind of saving locally and then publishing. It's not a one-way action. So that's something to keep in mind. The DAX Query Designer does give you a graphic way to design your queries. I will be the first to admit that it could use some work
A little bit.
in terms of being an even more user-friendly tool than it is today. There is also the option to switch to MDX, which is what the tool was originally designed for. You may see a performance hit. In fact, in often cases you will. That's why we added the capabilities to use DAX there. Another option is to use a third-party tool. Marco, are you aware of any third-party tools that do DAX? Okay. The DAX Studio, yes. And you can copy and paste your DAX items from those tools into here. You can also do this from Power BI Desktop. In fact, Patrick and I did a video, we talked about this. I did a video where I kind of showed this. There is a catch there where you have to make sure the visual, so the way you would do this is you would use the query analyzer, I believe.
The
performance analyzer, yes, thank you. And you'd see your DAX queries, but unless it's a table visual, it actually doesn't, in the context of if you bring the query over, it doesn't work properly here. So the way to handle this is you change your visual to a table, run the performance analyzer, get the query, and then bring it over, and that would be what you'd use. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're getting back.
Certain elements produce two queries.
Yes.
Right? And so you need to use one that only produces one query.
Yep.
And so another thing, if you decide to use this, this query designer, it doesn't work with implicit measures.
Yes.
You must create an explicit measure for the measures to show in this list. And so you got to understand what implicit and explicit measures are. So when you design in Power BI Desktop is aggregate aware. So anything that's a numeric data type is going to try to aggregate it automatically. And so you'll see that little summation symbol next to them in the field list. Those won't work here. You have to explicitly write the measure and create the measure for it to show in this list.
Yes.
Forgot about that.
No, that's a very good point. It's the same thing with Excel. Like if you use Analyze in Excel, that's the same experience you have there, and it's a challenge. I think that that's something that is oftentimes confusing for folks. An interesting point about this, so the endpoint that is used for the Power BI dataset connection is actually the same endpoint that's used for Analyze in Excel, or if you're connecting to a Power BI dataset in Power BI Desktop. That means that if you turn off the Analyze in Excel endpoint in your admin settings, you can't use that. Also, believe it or not, the export setting in your administration also controls the Analyze in Excel endpoint. How many people here knew that? Yes. So it's actually a superset, and it does say it in the text there. So if you have export turned off for certain users or for everyone of data from Power BI visuals, you cannot connect to Power BI data sets using Analyze in Excel, Power BI Desktop, or Power BI Report Builder. This is a gotcha that I got tripped up on when I was working with a customer and why they were having challenges here. Something else that I mention only because just today, somebody was asking Patrick about this, and he didn't mention that Paginated Reports can do this. How many people here use something called multi-dimensional analysis services?
No one.
Really, I just found out about this today. This brand new mode that we had.
This brand new mode for AS?
So there are limitations with what is supported in Power BI Desktop with multi-dimensional.
You're saying.
So I've been told.
Yes.
Okay. These, like things like ragged hierarchies, for example, these should work, and in fact, we've tested many of these scenarios, with paginated reports in the service. So if there are things that are specific to multidimensional that you've tried to use in the past and paginated reports are an option for you, it's something to consider. I just mentioned that because it was brought up this morning. Are there any questions on kind of the overview that I've just gone through to this point? Yes?
So you kind of walked through the example of connecting to an existing Power BI data set.
Yes.
Now, when you launch this tool, at the moment, you'll likely be on-prem. So if you're starting from scratch and you connect to just, say, a database, relational database, is it the gateway that's going to just automatically, the on-prem data gateway that's going to automatically work, or is more required?
So the question was, hey, if I'm using this for on-prem, I'm not using a Power BI data set, I'm using one of the traditional data sources that have been supported. So you would need the Power BI gateway set up for the databases that we support through the gateway right now as a live connection. There is no model in the middle in these scenarios. That's SQL Server, analysis services, either tabular or multidimensional, Oracle, and Teradata. Those are the only on-prem data sources we support today that doesn't require a Power BI data set as part of it. We also support things like Azure Analysis Services or Azure SQL Database. Those don't require an on-prem gateway. But yes, you would just need the gateway set up. Essentially pretend like you're setting up a gateway for a Power BI data set. It's the same thing. We use the same dialogues, et cetera. Yes?
I'm new to this topic, so I'm going to have a very stupid question.
There are no stupid questions.
After you deploy the paginated report to the Power BI service, are you able to export it?
That is a stupid, no, it's not. Absolutely is not a stupid question. So the question was, hey, if I load my paginated report up to the Power BI service, can I export it? The answer is yes, we support export. We support 6 different formats for export. We support Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF, MHTML for you MHTML fans out there, XML, and we support one more, CSV. CSV. So we have 6 different formats that you can export your report out to or the data out to. So no, it's not a stupid, there are no stupid questions at all. Yeah. So we'll talk about what's coming with the service here shortly, but that is a good question because it leads into one of the topics I'll be touching on. So I did have a rude FAQ for this section. How many people here are concerned that SSRS is dead?
Oh, there's people.
Yes. Okay. So it is not dead. We went and did a lot of work, actually, in the context of the 2019 release. And I'll show you and talk about the features that we went and added. It is fair to say that the focus of our development is very much on the cloud and moving people to the cloud at Microsoft. Guess what? That's Microsoft across the board. That is not unusual. But we actually have been doing nothing but the SSS release for the last 3 months or so. So we are spending time and investing there in things like accessibility, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we're looking at in terms of containerization and new data source support. So there is investment going on there. Power BI report servers released 3 times a year. We are looking at ways that make it easier for people to deploy it in an IaaS scenario, as I mentioned earlier. So it is not dead. And you're waiting for me to say yet. It is not dead, but I'm not going to sit here and say that we are heavily focused on the on-prem box product. We are not. It is part of our team's charter. We have a long tail of customers who are interested in using this product. We continue to support it. We continue to make investments in it, but there is no plans to sunset or get rid of it. Cool. Okay? What is the future of SSDT? One individual in this room, who may or may not be sitting directly in front of me, brings this up quite a bit. So I think you've seen from both the analysis services team and the reporting services team, we have been very focused on tooling that is not in the context of SSDT. Again, it's not going away, but we aren't making large new investment there. We are making minor things. What? We're not fixing. Yeah, well, no. So some people had noticed that the SQL Query Designer had been changed from the default experience to a new experience, which is the same in Report Builder. As of today, that has been fixed or updated to now use the previous experience that was based on feedback by, again, an individual in the front row here. But this is a topic that it was interesting listening to the focus group this morning in terms of one of the things we want to do is to go and focus on a single tooling story and drive that and make that truly the thing that we're pointing people to. Right now, we have this balance of we have these existing tools, and it is very challenging for us as an engineering organization to try and go and support and innovate in all of those areas. The things that are missing right now from the Power BI experience in terms of ALM support and multi-developer scenarios and the capabilities in the context of you're publishing a single report at a time with Power BI Report Builder or Power BI Desktop, and with SSDT you're publishing a project. Those are things that we're focused on across a myriad of teams to bring to the Power BI experience all up, including Paginated Reports. Are we going and doing a ton of net new investments in SSDT? No. But that does not mean it's going away, because there's still certain things that are using there, and we spend a lot of time going and making investments there to update, and there is a version coming for 2019. There specifically is for Visual Studio 2019, a brand new Visix. Right now I think it's in preview, but it will be brought to GA quality and be made available for development purposes. So again, is that where our new investments are? No. Is it going away? No. Are there other rude questions along this line? Yes?
I noticed that Microsoft didn't send any experts to the Microsoft Data Clinic or SSRS. So that was sort of my concern, is the SSRS being dead. There's no books in the bookstore section for SSRS. It's like it doesn't exist.
Same feeling for SSIS.
I can't, so the question was,
I believe Kathy Kellenberger's book was in the bookstore.
Okay.
Great first book.
okay,
Rox is pulling out of data books.
yeah. So I can't, so again, I will give you my personal opinion on this. I wouldn't expect, if I was saying, hey, I want to go write a book, what's really going to drive large purchasing? I know, a new book on Reporting Services 2019. That's just my 2 cents. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad idea. I'm just saying that as an author, I probably wouldn't focus there. As for the data clinic, I assure you, someone in this room expressed an interest in attending and being a part of that conversation, and that didn't happen. So, I won't say who. But I think that, again, it is not a deliberate slight or oversight for this particular item. the focus in the conversation, the marketing effort is to drive people in the, and honestly, one of the things that I like about the name Power BI Report Server is that when I first joined Microsoft 6 years ago, the problem was you had a BI story that was spread across like 4 different products. You didn't have a single branded BI experience at Microsoft. You had SharePoint, you had Excel, you had RS, you had AS, like, that hasn't been completely changed, but when people think of BI at Microsoft, they think of one name, Power BI. So if it's not under that umbrella, it is hard to get people's attention. I understand this audience is a little different than if you're going and talking to companies outside of, say, the SSRS community, but I wouldn't read too much into that in terms of that being a specific, those being a correlation of SSRS being dead. That's all. Cool. Other questions? Okay. I know there are more coming, but I think you'll be waiting. All right, so Patrick is going to do a demo, or he's going to ask if this is a necessary topic to cover.
Yeah.
Around why.
See, somebody already said yes.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, great. So why would I want to use paginated reports in Power BI, Patrick? Please.
I don't know.
All right. Oh, 4. Sorry. There you go.
So a common thing that's asked when I go and work with customers, like we're gonna migrate all of our Power BI, our RDLs to PBIX files. That ain't gonna work, right? Because there's a certain context, there's a certain thing you're trying to accomplish when you create a paginated report. And does anyone disagree with me, right? And so when I think about Power BI, I think about high-level aggregations and, you know, really large volumes of data that's answering the question. When I think about a paginated report, I think about a report card or a transcript or an invoice, right? And so what I did was I created this report in Power BI. Now I have a paginated version of this report. In the demo later, you'll see actually how it works. But if I look at this report, pretend that I'm a salesperson. And one of my clients, one of my customers, they call me up and they say, hey, Patrick, I need my invoices. So this is a Power BI report. And they may have 1 invoice, they may have 2 invoices or 3 invoices. And so in this case, there's about 6 invoices for these customers. And so if I click 1, right, invoice, it'll update the report. And this is the invoice that I want to send to this customer. I'm in Power BI now. I have 6 invoices that I want to send to these customers. How do I send all 6 of these using Power BI? I'm going to wait for someone to answer that question for me. It's okay. We got plenty of time. Right? And so, believe it or not, there's customers that try to do these things, and then they call Microsoft and go, Power BI sucks. Right?
Really?
Right? They go, Power BI sucks because I can't print all 6 of these invoices. This is not what Power BI is meant for. Right? Power BI is meant for a different purpose. Whenever I create Power BI reports, or I create data models, I don't create reports. Whenever I create the data model, I'm thinking about somebody that's going to consume it, that's going to start clicking and looking for an answer to a question. When I create a paginated report, the paginated report is serving a specific purpose. Right? It is really serving a purpose. It's so I can print report cards for every student in the district. I wouldn't do that with Power BI. So if I tried to print this now,
Be under export.
Oh, I got to export.
No,
That's right.
the print dialog, I believe, is under export now.
It's under export. See what I'm talking about? Right? So now I got to click export, and then I can click print, but it's only going to print that one page. So then I got to do another slice, print, do another slice, print. Not very efficient. You guys know how I am. I'm not lazy, just efficient. Right? I tell that to my wife all the time. And so you can't accomplish this using a Power BI report, but if we think of another tool, like paginated reports, it would be easy to solve this problem. And you can even take the context of this, and we'll talk about this in a little bit when we get to that point. You're going to talk about parameters. And so when we get to that point, I can use Power BI and paginated reports, and they would work together, right? They would complement each other. And so maybe I'm doing some analysis of a report, and in Power BI, and then I want to pass the context from my Power BI report. What I mean is the parameters, the filters, to my paginated report, and then print some very specific things. Does that make sense? And then there's another valid reason that I think you should definitely complement your Power BI reports with paginated reports. What's the maximum export that you can do in Power BI? 150, right? And so, I'm not discounting the power of Power BI. I'm not, no pun intended. I'm not saying Power BI is not a powerful tool. It just can't do everything that paginated reports can do. And so we have a lot of people, unfortunately, Marco and Chris designs tabular models. Chris don't design tabular models. But they design really nice models, and they give it to the end user, and then the end user drags and drops and creates it. Then they want to do what? Export. And then they call and say, Microsoft, Power BI sucks, because you only can export 150,000 rows of data. Why would you want to export 150,000 rows of data?
Because you can't.
Yeah, I want to get intimate with it, right? And so there's lots and lots and lots of data out there, but I build this semantic model so that you can slice and dice so you don't have to export. And so you can use paginated reports to exceed that limit, right? So I can build like a table, a flat table that contains 1 million rows, and then you can pass the context and then print that, export it to PDF or CSV or whatever you want to do.
Why would you export 1 million rows to a PDF?
Man, I don't know why people do what they do.
I'm just curious. I'm just curious the use case.
I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
I can tell you why.
Okay.
Oh, okay, great.
There you go.
This is,
Don't bail him out.
this is all because of Excel. So everybody starts using Excel, and they are so good in macros, they will never leave even Power Pivot or even going to Power BI or Paginated.
Okay.
So with that, they export it out,
Yeah.
the million rows, and then what they do, they run the macros, and they get what they want.
No, that's perfectly valid. I was saying, he said, export 1 million rows to PDF, and I questioned
was using an
the use
example.
case very specifically. I mean, again, being the expert from Guy in a Cube here, I would expect.
Well, if you want nobody to touch the data, you would do it to PDF. Yes. I wouldn't decide.
Now, there you go. Because
No,
I don't
that-
want them to modify it. That's why I only let them export the PDF.
Except just yesterday, Miguel had a blog post where you can use a PDF as your data source.
Okay.
Nice
So
try.
anyway, right, there's a valid case for both.
Okay, that's fine.
For both, and you can't replace Power BI with paginated needs, and you can't replace paginated with Power BI needs, because paginated is not self-service. It just doesn't lend itself well to self-service like Power BI does, all right?
But can I ask you one question?
Yes, of course.
So with this paginated, are you able to combine Power BI report, which is the summary, you aggregate all your data, now you go using the drill through,
Hang on,
push it to,
hang on. We're gonna show that. In a way, we're gonna show it in a way.
You can show it right now.
No,
if
I
you
don't want to show it right now yet. I'm not ready to
But
show it.
she asked a very good question.
Okay, all right. So you can kind of sort of do it. So we don't have the built-in drill through capabilities that are in paginated, that's in SSRS today. We don't have that. But if you want to take your Power BI report, let's say I'm doing some analysis, right? Let's say I'm here and I'm doing some analysis of this data. So I got this beautiful tree map, and I don't even know what this is, but I have all this built on this report, and I'm looking at it from a high level, but then I want to export, right? I want to take the filter context, right? So right now, I'm filtered for wingtip toys. I have multiple locations, and I have a date range. And what I want to do is I want to open up a paginated report that's filtered the exact same way. So when paginated reports first came out, I called Chris Finlan, and I was like, Chris, we need URL parameter support. And he was like, yeah, you're not going to get it right now. And he was honest with me. I like his honesty. And then next week I called him and I said, Chris, when are we going to get URL parameter support? And he said, you're not going to get it yet. And then several months later we were at MBAS and I said, Chris, when am I going to get URL parameter support? And he said, here you go, buddy. Here's your URL parameter support. Yes, I was so excited. And then what you can do is...
This is not how it occurred. For the record.
It's abbreviated. It's abbreviated. I gave you
Yes, and
I gave you the
slanted and
abridged
wrong,
version. I
but
gave you the-
sure.
Okay. Anyway, so what?
No, it's fine. Please continue.
And so what you would do inside of Power BI, you write a little bitty tiny DAX, just a little bit of DAX, to build out the URL. Okay? So you would publish your report to Power BI, your paginated report to Power BI. You grab that URL, and then Chris, they added URL parameter support. So basically what I can do is I can build this out passing, wingtip toys, all my selections, and my date in the URL, and I can even print how I want to render this report. I can even add that how I want to render it. And so if I click this button, what will happen is it's going to render the Power BI report, but I also added to the string here, you'll see it. It's going to automatically start rendering, exporting it to PDF. And so you can build this out using, a little DAX expression and building the internet, and building the URL out, then it'll download the PDF, and then there you go, right? So yes, you can do some sort of drill through, but it's probably not it's not the built-in drill through that you got from SSRS, not yet.
That's fair.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, there's a question.
So the DAX expression is able to pass the parameters for the parameters that you're using on the URL, for your SSRS paginated report.
Yes, so let me show you. So see right here in the URL, let me just copy it out to a notepad. The best text editor in the world. So go to a notepad.
But I was going to say you could show that it finished downloading
Yep.
the report.
And so you can see right there, right? So I'm passing the buying group, which is 2. Then if you want to pass multiple things, you have to construct the DAX in a way so that it's going to, append multiple things for the multi-select list. And then you can see at the end here, you can do, your customer and your from and to date. But what's really cool about this is if you don't want to learn all that stuff, something they did that's really cool, if you go to File, you can do generate a link for this report. And when I generate the link, whichever parameters are set in that report, it'll automatically generate it for you. So you can use that as, yes. Use that as a template in the report so you don't have to guess about it. But Chris did write a pretty good blog post on how to do
Yeah,
this.
no, that specifically, the point there is that you have to know what the name of the parameter is.
Yeah.
And if you're not the person who built the report, you probably aren't going to know what the name of that specific parameter is because the label there could potentially be different.
Yep.
So we specifically made sure we added that. And again, once you take that URL as it's constructed, you can put it in your Power BI report and change the actual values you want to pass through. But yeah, we did that specifically because we knew it would be difficult to reconstruct. So the question was, hey, does that generate link include the additional item, the export option? It doesn't. We've documented very specifically all of the different things. Basically, you need to add RDL:format equals, and then you have your items. We also include in there specifically a number of additional items that you can set depending on the format. So you can set certain things in terms of the actual margins of a page, or you can set, these are, for people familiar with SSRS, these are the device info settings. So we support device info settings in the context of the URL. We also, it's not quite there yet, but in probably another week or two, you'll see the ability to hide or show the parameter pane in the URL, hide or show the actual toolbar, and there was one other item specifically. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was 3 things that we were going to have there specifically that you can hide or show based on your URL parameters.
Could be.
Well, so the question was, can we think of that as a poor man's subscription? We have subscription capabilities that also support parameters. So, and they can be expression-based parameters in that context. It's not unfair to think that that's something at a specific point in time with specific values you would have, and as a way to share that link for people to view it with that context. But We have specific support for that in the subscriptions as well. It doesn't use exactly the same dialogue. If you click on the link in your subscription mail, it'll bring you back, and even though it doesn't generate the URL the same way, it takes you back with still the parameter context there. So I think I wouldn't use the term subscriptions personally, but I don't think it's unfair to say that's a great way to have a specific point in time view of a report. There's a question over here, yes?
Are there any limitations imposed by Power BI on the length of the URL? Or is it just by the browser?
So, interestingly enough, this is an interesting question in terms of, no, sorry. So the question was, hey, is there a Power BI limit in terms of the URL length? Or is it a browser-based thing that specifically? There is a Power BI limit in terms of the browser URL length that we are changing because some people were running into it. We were unaware that Power BI was putting a limit in there. It essentially matches what's in IE right now, which is 2,048 characters. Chrome and other browsers actually support up to like 65,000 characters. So we were removing that limit in terms of what Power BI was imposing, because there was really not a reason we understood why that limit was there. So there is a Power BI limit, but we're making a change around that piece. So that's a good question. Yes? Yes. So the question was, hey, can you embed paginated reports in your application and use the embedded API? We now have support for paginated reports in the following embedded scenarios. The SaaS embed scenario, again, where it's basically you're using Azure Active Directory as a user owns data story. I think the embedded team talks about it. Literally just yesterday, the embedded team announced support for app owns data scenarios with embedding with the embed APIs. There's also support for something called secure embed, which is basically a no-code way to embed content. If you look in the file menu, you have the option there. You went off the report, but that's okay.
That's all right. Here we go.
Yeah. So you have the option there to do the secure embed dialog just like you do. Yeah.
Right
yeah.
there?
So you can do right there. Yep. So the secure embed dialog, if you use that URL, you can also use the URL parameter values as part of that as well. So that's supported too. So the answer to your question is yes. There's support for all three of those scenarios at this point. Yes? This is the service. Yes.
What if I'm still on the 2016 box and I want to hop over for some old style RDO report, not this new?
You could do it.
So you're looking to go from a Power BI report in the service to the on-prem server. Yes, you can do that. In fact, Patrick did a demo of this scenario last pass,
Yeah.
and I think you have a blog post specifically on this.
I do.
Yeah, so absolutely you can still do that. And there's nothing wrong with SSRS 2016. Yes?
Patrick, can you go back to Power BI? Please? Okay. Where you have the publish app? Okay.
Oh, you're talking about publishing an app from the app workspace?
I need to ask. So this publish app, per workspace, there's only one app.
Correct.
Do you have any plan of doing multiple? Why?
Okay, so the question is, from an app workspace, can you publish multiple apps? I can say right now the planned answer for that is no, but it's not my fault because this is the Paginated Reports session. So the answer to that question right now is no.
Yeah, can't do it.
Okay,
It's a pain because
Yeah.
I don't disagree. If Wukash was here, I'd wring his neck for you. In terms of
That's being recorded.
no, I'm kidding. I love Wukash. No, but that comes up quite a bit. All right, so want to keep moving along. Everybody's favorite topic, licensing for paginated reports in Power BI. So today, to run paginated reports, you need a P1 through P3 SKU. For how many people here know what Power BI Premium is? Does anyone here not know what Power BI Premium is? Okay, a couple people. Power BI Premium is a SKU you can purchase where you get a dedicated capacity to run your Power BI workloads on. It also includes some additional capabilities or higher limits than you get if you're using the shared service, what's often referred to as the Power BI Pro piece, which again, because you can buy a per user license, which is called a Pro license. One of the capabilities that's limited right now to premium or dedicated capacities is Paginated Reports. Now, for many of you, if you remember last year when I presented on this topic or previously, I've talked about the reason why it is currently limited to P1 to P3 or A4 to A6 is there was a technical limitation in place where we had to figure out how to run this in a shared service to make it available at a lower SKU point. So the good news is that we figured out the technical way to go do that. However, as you can see, it is not available in any SKUs outside of this right now. Does anyone have any questions on this point? Yes. So, how many people think I am the ultimate decision maker on this? You are dead wrong. So, no, I have never said no. So, apparently some of you asked Amir about this yesterday. If you heard Arun, he did an interview earlier this week on a podcast from some of the MVPs. And they both gave essentially something's in the works, we'll have more to share with you next year. Is that about right?
Yep.
Okay. Something's in the works, we'll have something more to share with you next year. I don't know what that will be. The question often is, hey, will Paginated Reports come in Pro? I don't know. Will Paginated Reports be in a per user SKU that's not Pro? I don't know. It is fair to say that at some point next year, it will be available at a lower price point. What that looks like is very much a conversation that is ongoing and ongoing. I assure you, the folks on this stage are pushing very hard for that to happen. Vote on it on ideas.powerbi.com, send mail, stomp your feet, I don't know. I assure you, we want to make this more widely available. Please don't beat me up in the parking lot. All right. So, what we've added since GA. So we GA'd this product back in June, or this functionality in June, and we've actually done a number of things, although we haven't done much in the last couple of months because we've been so focused on the RS 2019 release. But even with that, we've added all these new capabilities. I talked about the embedding support. Patrick did a great job showing off the URL parameters piece. That was actually far more challenging to go and implement than we originally thought, because we went and we actually expanded the scope there to include the device info information. RDL migration tool. There is a migration tool for you to move paginated reports from your on-prem server to the cloud service. It was done by our intern over the summer as an intern project. It is available on GitHub. Patrick is going to demonstrate that for you as part of this. He was having some challenges earlier, but he got there. But there is a tool available to move your reports, and it does do certain things like, for example, right now in the service, we don't have support for the concept of shared data sources or shared data sets. If it's a supported data source in the context of Power BI, we'll convert it as part of the upload process. That's one of the things. It also doesn't delete your files from the server or anything. It just takes a copy and moves them up to the service. So again, it's a very lightweight item right now. It's available in the community. Folks are free to iterate on it. It does show and demonstrate the API support that's available from both locations to move those files. So again, that's just the first step as part of this. Comments is there, secure embed. So, and the 500 minor improvements fixes, we moved very, very quickly to get this available. The team is consistently going and looking for ways to improve the product. There are bugs that pop up. If you see issues, and if you're using paginated reports, the best way to get that in front of the team is to file a CSS ticket. You can ping me on Twitter and call me names, which I know some people have done. It is hurtful. But the reason why oftentimes I'll point people to support is not because I don't want to help you. It's because this helps illustrate and focus the engineers in the areas that need the most attention. We only have a certain number of folks that can be working on these things at one time, and it's not to try and push people off and that we don't want to support you. But if I get a random item coming in, I'll go to the engineers, they'll be like, yes, we've got all these other things that came in from these customers. So again, if you see issues, use the forums and things like that, but if we're telling you to go file it with CSS, it's not because we're trying to push you off. It's more that we want to have this documented and show what we're working on and help focus the engineering effort.
Does that cost money?
There is a level of free support in Power BI for customers, even if you're a pro user. If you're a premium user, again, there is support. Oftentimes customers have SA. I don't believe every call to CSS costs money. I mean, unless I'm missing something. I know customers do have premier agreements, but that's a little bit different.
I don't know.
Yeah. So what we're planning, I talked about the lower price point. I feel very comfortable saying there will be a lower price point for Paginated Reports in 2020. Again, I can't share any details. I wish I could, but I really don't know what that'll end up shaking out to be. RDL parity features is something we're very, very focused on. It will be challenging and probably impossible to get 100% parity between SSRS and Power BI. However, in terms of RDL, the report itself, that's something we can achieve. And so the big things, and I mean, this makes me feel good from a PM perspective that I've organized the backlog properly, but the big things that are brought up are specifically these two items, subreports and drill through between RDLs. Not even close in terms of features that people ask me about. Other things come up, but in terms of things people ask me about that's blocking them right now, those are two big ones. DAX query enhancements, as has been alluded to here, I've kind of danced around it. Right now, our experience with DAX is not ideal. It's serviceable, but it's not ideal. This is by far the biggest challenge we have today in terms of getting net new authors to be comfortable using paginated reports. What's been great to see is that we have a lot of people who have never even thought of using SSRS in the past interested in taking advantage of paginated reports. So they get very excited, they download Power BI Report Builder, and then they're met with that very helpful splash screen. It is not very helpful. They get lost almost immediately. And this becomes a very difficult thing to get them to overcome. Once they do, and again, it's not nearly as big a hill as they think it may be, but once they do, I've worked with a couple of people internally at Microsoft who've been thrilled at the things that they can go do here, because if you look at the top 20 ideas on ideas.powerbi.com, 11 of those can be solved by paginated reports. Now, maybe that's changed since the last time I looked, but it may not be exactly how you want to do it. I totally understand the desire and need to want to do many of these things in Power BI Desktop. However, oftentimes people don't even realize they can do it in paginated reports because they think RDL or SSRS reports, because of the name paginated, is only about printing or exporting, and that is not the case. I will say one of the reasons I named Paginated Report Bearer that is I thought it was kind of a silly name, so I thought Paginated Report Bearer would help highlight that. Unfortunately, the bear took off, and that didn't really work. But in all seriousness, it's not just about those scenarios. SSRS has been around a long time, and the RDL language allows you to do some extraordinary things. And I encourage you to go and look at if you're not familiar with the product or the tool or what you can do with RDL, there's a myriad of resources out there that I encourage you to look at. We are, and I'll talk about this in a bit, there is training coming on this that we're going to make more widely available, something like what we have with Dashboard in a Day. So this is something we're focused on the DAX experience because people are doing exactly what we hope they'd do. They're using their Power BI data sets, and they want to use a paginated report against that. And again, that ties right into the onboarding experience. Scalability and reliability improvements. How many people here have Power BI Premium? Okay, great.
Wow.
How many people here have challenges with the resource management on Power BI Premium? Wow, okay, that's great. That's good news. But, okay, well, people outside this room have provided feedback that they have challenges around how do they manage their capacities in terms of, hey, I want to run this paginated report, it's using a lot of memory, and I've got these refreshes happening at the same time, and it's taking a long time for this to run. So we're working on ways to make this more scalable and reliable as you go and grow your deployments. We're seeing very, very strong adoption, even with some of the challenges we have around pricing right now, amongst those customers that have those SKUs. They're looking to go big and wide, and depending on their architecture, they may run into challenges around that. That is something that we're absolutely focused on. The last item, the API support for rendering. The reason why I bring this up is somebody earlier mentioned data-driven subscriptions. Gentleman over here, correct? Yes, here? Okay, sorry. So data-driven subscriptions is something that's been around with SSRS for a long time. It is planned. Data-driven subscriptions is planned as something we would bring to the Power BI service for paginated reports and probably for Power BI reports as well. The challenge there is right now the timing around that is still a little TBD. By exposing the render API, and we did a prototype of this quite some time ago, what had happened is internally, before we had subscription support, one of the engineers on the team had an API exposed which we connected to Flow and then had it spit out a PDF and mail it to everybody. With the things that we have support for, like URL parameters and the API support and the format support, you could drive a data-driven subscription scenario using Flow, or actually, yes, it's not Flow anymore, it's Power Automate. Automate. You could do that scenario specifically that way. That's something that we can do far quicker than the full-blown data-driven experience in the context of Power BI. Now, we do have subscription support in Power BI right now for paginated reports. It does support parameters, so you can choose your parameters and set up a subscription to be run based on that. And for many, many people, they don't need the full-blown bursting or data-driven experience as well, but we get a lot of asks for that as just something, hey, we use this in the context of SSRS. That's a way we could potentially solve that in a shorter time frame. The things I'm talking about here are things we're looking at over the next 6 months. Data-driven subscriptions I don't show here because I want to feel very confident I get to it in that time, and right now I'm with other things kind of coming in and out. I'm not quite sure we'll get to it in that time frame yet. What things am I missing from this list that you were hoping to see for paginated reports? Nothing. I've done a perfect job. This is fantastic. See, on video, they can't see that. No, so yes. Somebody raise your hand over here. Just shout it out if you're.
Yeah, just for any plans for you to come to on-prem?
So the question was, hey, are there any plans for any of this to come on-prem? It exists on-prem. These are all capabilities as it relates to RDL. So DAX query enhancements, if we do something there in the context of Report Builder, that's probably something we can put in both versions of Report Builder. The other items in terms of the RDL parity features and the APIs, and that's not something that, I guess, what exactly are you hoping from this list to come to the on-prem experience?
Well, specifically, RDL parity features, the ability to launch RDL with pass-through parameters from Power BI.
You could do that.
You can do, so the question was the ability to pass through, so from the Power BI service as passing through to that, you're talking about in the context of Power BI report server?
Yes.
Okay. So as it relates to Power BI report server, and I want to get to the SSRS stuff here shortly, we'll talk about the future investment plans there as part of that section. Okay. Why don't we move on to the demo from Patrick to talk about the migration piece, and then I'll talk about the training piece. We'll just do a quick time check here.
Yeah, I'll do it really quick.
Oh, geez, yeah, we only got 10 minutes.
So the first thing you got to do is go to GitHub, and I think it's aks.ms RDL migration.
Yes.
Yeah. But you go to GitHub, and I guess we can put the link in the slide deck before we upload it. And you go here, and it was interesting. So this morning we were like, well, how do you get it? How do you get this thing? And so it's not It's not very intuitive, but you click on releases, and then you scroll down. There's a section for assets, and then you'll see this zip file. You download the zip file and extract it, and you'll get an exe that you can use. And then all you need to do is, in the documentation, it's actually pretty decent. And you'll see right here, they provide you with how you call it. It is from a command prompt. So you call the name of the exe, then you put your report server URL in, the path. You can do a folder or a specific file, the name of the workspace you want to migrate it to, and then it explains down on the bottom how to get your client ID, right? So that's so you can authenticate and do things in Power BI, right? And then once you do that, all you need to do is run this. And what it does is it validates the RDL to make sure that it can upload to Paginated Reports in Power BI, and then it does a really good job of it. So if I run this, it's going to request that I authenticate to Power BI, which is not a big deal, you know. So you do need admin permissions to do this, and so I do have an admin account, and right here. And I click sign in, and then in a few seconds you'll watch, hey, you just logged in successfully, I'm starting the conversion, found 3 reports, and then it's actually gonna take those reports, copy them, and move them to your, so you can see that it's already had success moving those reports. And if I go over to Power BI and I refresh this page, you see that it automatically moved those reports for me from my on-premises report server that's running here on my, it's Rose Report. So
it's running actually in the Microsoft Cloud.
And it took those 3 reports and copied them up to my workspace that's backed by Premium, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Yeah, yep. Good question.
Yeah, so we actually it talks about it in there. We provided support. We used the SOAP APIs, so we made sure we supported back several versions. So I think from 2012 on.
They want you to repeat.
Yeah, the question was, what versions of SSRS do we support the migration from? So all the currently public supported versions, 2012 on, you can use this tool with. Oh, so the question is, hey, are subscriptions migrated as part of this? The answer is no. This tool right now is specifically just the reports. It doesn't move any other assets as part of the migration process.
What about the dependent data sources?
So the question is, hey, are the dependent data source moved? I mentioned, so if you're using a shared data source or data set, it will convert that to an embedded data source or data set in the RDL and move the file up. If those data sources are not supported in the Power BI service, it'll say, we can't move this file, and it just won't move that particular RDL. But that's a good question. All right, so I want to make sure last time I did this, I didn't get to the stuff around the on-prem stuff. So in SSRS 2019, there were some new features announced that I want to go through. One of the big ones was we now have support for Azure SQL MI, managed instance. You can use that as your catalog for SSRS in 2019 or Power BI Report Server. When I talk about these features, basically if you're using the September 2019 release of Power BI Report Server or SSRS 2019, these features will work. So you can use that as your catalog for SSRS. Interestingly enough, there was a lot of demand for this. People have been looking for this for quite some time. They were looking for it originally with Azure SQL DB and then Azure SQL MI, so we made sure we support this. You have to use a username and password right now. There is no concept of AAD in SSRS or Power BI Report Server as it relates to the catalog, so you have to go and use username and password for this scenario to be supported, and that's documented, the limitation there. Okay? We also have TDE support, or Transit Data Encryption support, on the catalog. So if you have that set for your SQL Server instance for your database catalog for RS or PBRS, that will work just fine with the front-end service. So that's something that's even available now in Standard Edition for SQL Server. So again, that's something else to keep in mind. And I didn't have a time to put it on a slide. Accessibility. This was a major area, and I was mentioning to somebody at the booth today, there was a bug filed around this from one of our government customers in 2008 that was sitting out there. It took a long time for us to kind of get this all pulled together, but we have now the PDF support for accessibility that many government customers are looking for. So in terms of, if you go to Word now and you want to have it exported out to a PDF or saved as a PDF and you click it, you make sure, I think by default it has the accessible tag checked. We have that same level of support. And we have that all documented now online. I see Maggie over there. She just got that posted. So we talk about all of the things that we support in that scenario. And we also have alt text support for all the report elements. This is also in the service. So you have support for both of these things on the server and in the service. Accessibility is an important initiative at Microsoft. This is not a little deal. This was a very, very big deal for us to go do. So I'm very proud of the team for being able to kind of pull that together. The XML endpoint, some people have, actually a number of people in here have Power BI Premium, and they still have SSRS. You can use the XML endpoint as an analysis services instance for your RDLs in SSRS. You just go and you use SQL Server Analysis Services as long as you're using the latest client tools. You can go and connect to that XML endpoint just like you would any other analysis services instance, and then you can create an RDL and load it to your Power BI report server or SSRS instance.
Got a question?
Yes?
Does that mean on my on-premise Power BI report server, I can call a data set and it's in PowerBI.com?
You can call, so the question is, in Power BI report server, can I call a data set in PowerBI.com? You can only do that if it's running in premium and you're using the XML endpoint. Yes. Yes, we wouldn't let you run analysis services for $10 a month and then just run all your RS reports. That probably would be problematic. Windows container support. How many people are excited by the idea of having container support for SSRS? Poor Guillermo. So Guillermo is a developer on the team who has been passionate about this project, and he said, hey, you can have people email me directly if they're excited about this because he wants to get it out there. And yeah. So look, this is something that we are, I would say, are planning to go do. We would put this out on GitHub, a project where you could go and use RS 2019 in containers. This would not actually apply to Power BI Report Server. It would only be for SSRS. We haven't done it yet. I don't quite have a timeline yet. I think it's going, hopefully we'll have time to do it soon. For some folks, they got very excited about this when I talked about it. Obviously, this isn't that particular audience. So we don't have this quite yet, but it is something to keep in mind that we could make available if you're looking for this in the future. Someone else asked a question about Power BI Report Server. So Power BI Report Server, we had our last update for 2019 in September. We committed to, at the end of 2018, we would have 3 releases this year, and we would release them in January, May, September going forward. We hit that time frame. We have our next release planned in January. You've seen a roll-up of the desktop features coming in. Not all of them, but the vast majority of features come in. In the January 2020 release, we're planning to add support for export to Excel from your Power BI visuals. So that will raise the limit from 30,000 to 150,000. You'll have that dialogue in place. The developers are working on this as I speak. So that's the big thing. In terms of investments moving forward, as I spoke about previously, very much our focus is getting people to the Microsoft Cloud. You will continue to see the roll-up of the desktop pieces come into the server, along with select tactical investments moving forward. But as we've positioned Power BI Report Server, we're looking at this as a bridge moving you from the Power BI on-prem to the cloud, and that over time, your journey will take you there. I think everybody in here is aware that that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. But in terms of the majority of our development effort, it will continue to be going towards the cloud service. So I try to make sure that we have something coming in each release, or try to have a few things that the community goes and talks about. I can't promise anything right now in terms of what would be coming for Power BI Report Server beyond that January release. But again, I know that there's a lot of community interest out there and focus on that product. We're looking for ways to continue to innovate there with the resources we have. So we're right up at time. Are there any additional questions we have here? Don't forget to fill out your evals. Thank you very, very much for coming to this session. And if you have a few things you want to come up here, Patrick will be here for a few minutes.